We finally got the shocking interview. Jeffrey Gundlach, he's the billionaire founder of DoubleLine Capital, and he sat down with Yahoo News where he made some stunning predictions regarding the future of this country and economy. The interview is over 30 minutes long, but in today's video, we're just going to focus on a couple of specific clips regarding the astonishing predictions Jeffrey is making. The big question on everyone's mind is specific to one thing. Where is this all going, and is a Great Depression coming to this country? Before you call me out for clickbait, here is the king of bonds, billionaire investor, and one of the most respected names in finance saying the impossible. America is headed towards a dark place. But before we begin, I just want to give a quick shout out. This video was made in partnership with the Daily Upside, a free financial newsletter that offers high quality coverage of daily business and finance news. Visit the link in the description to learn more. Now back to the video. Let's take a listen.
I almost feel like there's no turning back on some of these things. I feel like the Taiwan-Chinese situation is getting near an end game. I think the U.S. dollar reserve currency situation is getting more near an end game. And that's really going to be the game changer. When I say the next bailout is going to be the one that maybe breaks the camel's back, I think it'll take the dollar down. So it's in the next recession, I think, that we're going to see dollar weakness, and the dollar is very, very overvalued versus our twin deficits. One of my most trusted indicators is the direction of the dollar broadly versus the twin deficits as a percentage of GDP. There's a long lead time. It's a long-term thing. It doesn't work for a year. It's something that has like an 8-year cycle.
Okay, that may have not sounded shocking to a regular person, but what Jeffrey just said there is that in the next recession, when bailouts happen again, just as they did in 2007, the dollar is done. If you were not aware, the US dollar is the reserve currency of the world. Without getting into the details, this means that the United States and its citizens enjoy many economic privileges that other countries could only dream of. Historically, once a country loses its status as the worldwide reserve, it's the final nail in the coffin, the end of an empire. This process of slow decay has already started for the dollar. To understand this, you have to understand the relationship between interest rates and inflation. In our country, we have seen this relationship disintegrate, putting our powerful dollar at risk. You see, when times get tough, the Fed lowers rates to promote economic activity. It's their job to keep this delicate balance. Lower the rates too far and you'll overheat the economy. Raise the rates too much and you'll end up with a recession. So how does all of this relate to the downfall of the dollar? Well, the story starts way back in the 1980s when the US faced a massive inflation crisis. Paul Volcker and Ronald Reagan solved it by raising interest rates. Specifically, they raised the rate to a crazy 18%. This put a massive strain on businesses, but it ultimately fixed the problem with the decaying US dollar. Eventually, the Federal Reserve began to lower these rates once they realized inflation was disappearing. With each subsequent year of progress, the rate fell and fell until it reached 6% in the mid-80s. At this point, the Fed decided to up the rates once again, giving them more breathing room in the future if times got bad and they needed to cut rates to spur economic progress. But remember, back then, raising the rate to give more breathing room was done at 6%, which was a low number back then. They did this until about 1989. That year, the rate got to 10% and the economy began to sputter. Soon, the US entered a recession. Once again, to fix this, the Fed lowered the rate just as they would in any other recession, and the economy went back to normal. But this process of lowering interest rates and then raising them after recovery revealed a massive flaw with our system. Each time the Fed completed this process, the limit of how high they could push interest rates before the economy sputtered grew lower and lower. By the time 2018 came around, we saw that even when the Fed raised the rate to a mere 1.8%, the economy gave up and the stock market collapsed. This is the real reason why we have 0% interest, and it's why the Fed simply can't afford to raise the rate even a little bit. We saw earlier this week that even when they just mentioned that they planned on raising the rate to 0.75% this year, the entire market took a massive L. This is also why multiple experts say that the Fed is stuck. It can't raise the rate without creating a massive recession, but by sitting idle, they watch inflation destroy the dollar. While the official inflation report reveals a 6.8% decay in the dollar, the real number felt by people is likely much worse because the government has manipulated the stats for years in their favor. This isn't some conspiracy theory, it's a fact accepted even by prominent hedge fund managers. Take a listen to Jeffrey explain this massive issue that continues to break down society. But before we get into his comments, let me quickly tell you about today's video partner, The Daily Upside. If you struggle to find useful and unbiased financial news, The Daily Upside may be the solution to your problem. The Daily Upside is a completely free daily email newsletter written by a team of former investment bankers, scholars, and journalists. It has quickly become the first thing I read in the morning, as the insights they offer on business and financial news are clear, unbiased, and a bit witty. Unlike traditional financial clickbait, the Daily Upside goes beyond the headlines to give you real perspective and analysis that is not dumbed down. Just last week, they had a great piece on this. As someone who needs to stay on top of news to create visits like this, I cannot recommend the Daily Upside enough. Whether you're a financial professional or just looking to get an edge on the markets, the Daily Upside will help. Check out the link in my description. It is totally free, and if you don't love the Daily Upside, you can always unsubscribe. Now let's get back to Jeffrey's comments.
And inflation is going to continue to go up, at least in the next couple of months.
Where do you see inflation this year?
Well,
CPI.
Okay. We have to look at different measures of CPI. CPI is at 6.8 right now, year over year. The one that's rolling off for last December is 0.2. So the way things are going, it seems pretty likely that we're going to get a 7 handle on the CPI soon. But the CPI, of course, is a strange construct. It's not calculated the same way as European CPI. If you use the European CPI methodology, our CPI right now would be at 7.8. So it's calculated a little bit differently. Also, there's this strange thing about shelter that's almost a third of our CPI. And shelter includes largely something called owner's equivalent rent. And owner's equivalent rent is not a real thing. It's not like you're going out there and measuring rents. What you're doing is asking people that don't rent out their house, if you did rent out your house, what do you think you'd rent it out for versus last year? As if a regular homeowner that doesn't rent out their house has any idea. I probably couldn't estimate what I could rent my property out for within 20%. I have no idea. I've never looked at it.
So there's your main problem with all of this. We measure inflation by trusting the government sources to provide us with the data. Most of the time, nobody cares about inflation, but when it gets bad enough and people feel their paychecks becoming worth less and less, they start to get angry. Imagine you're a skilled inspector who made $25 an hour in the Midwest. This was once a respected salary, but when the Taco Bell worker down the road is offered 18, your mind begins to boil. The natural human instincts of jealousy, injustice, and selfishness kick in. Now add in the fact that your rent is shooting up, the price of food is skyrocketing, and you have a recipe for disaster. Slowly, your paycheck buys you less and less, and the government is telling you that housing is only up 3%, an absurd estimation given the fact that by most other accounts, rents are up over 21% this year alone. In all cases throughout history, the government makes many attempts to downplay the facts on the ground when it comes to the collapse of their currency. 2 years ago, anyone who mentioned that the US may experience hyperinflation would quickly get labeled as a conspiracy theorist. Now with each passing day, we are seeing that these Michael Burry tweets are getting closer and closer to reality. The government can spew whatever nonsense it wants regarding the cost of goods, but you can't stop the people from feeling their paychecks erode away at an unprecedented pace. If you understand inflation psychology, you know that it's a dangerous state of mind that leads to consumers spending more quickly than they otherwise would in the belief that prices are rising. In the past, this psychology took much longer to develop among the masses, but today, with the presence of social media, cell phones, and a 24/7 news cycle, many experts theorize that this will move much faster in the 21st century. Essentially, they believe that hyperinflation is much easier to achieve in the era of social media. Whatever the case may be, we can easily conclude that Jeffrey's comments are very concerning. It's sad to hear a prominent hedge fund manager state that he believes the dollar will collapse in the next bailout. As always, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed. And if you haven't already, please make sure you click the link in the description to check out today's sponsor, The Daily Upside.